And I was online.
Are we ready? All right. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to this Facebook Live 131 engine build. I'm Chris Booth, shop foreman, lead tech here at Harley-Davidson of Indianapolis. We're going to continue where we left off. Last week, we got it disassembled. We got the cam out. We got the pistons off. So today, we're just going to kind of start out where I would have picked up then, and we're going to get the cam installed. I'm going to show you everything that's involved with installing the cam, all the spacing that's involved, the bearing replacement, and so forth. And then we'll just see how far we get today. So that's that. That's our introduction. Get our plastic off here. Always have plastic on there. You know, we don't want anything to drop down into that motor because we're not going into the bottom end. So we don't want anything in there. So the first thing we were probably going to do is we're going to replace this inner cam bearing right here. There's a bearing right there. I don't know if we can shed some light on it, but there's a bearing right there. Once I get that out of there, I'm going to show you the difference between that one and the one we've got over here on the table that we're going to install. That's the bearing that comes stock, and the one that we're going to put in is considered a Screamin' Eagle. Get our special tool here. Yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff to talk about. Oil pump, we got some fun stuff to talk about with the oil pump. I was out here earlier in the week and realized that our oil pump definitely needed updating. So Harley pays for that when you're installing a stage 3 or stage 4. I think we have to submit a form or file a claim, but so basically this tool right here goes in, and I'm gonna spread out these forks. I don't know if you can see it on this. There's lines cut in here, so there's a forcing screw that goes in here and it spreads this apart. So that's what's gonna grab a hold of that bearing in there, and then we're gonna pull it out. This is a Harley special tool. I'm not sure if you can get these. I think you can buy aftermarket tools from companies on the internet. They may or may not work as good as this Harley one does. It's a Harley special tool. Yep. You can get these online. I think George's Garage is a company that sells a lot of Harley specialty tools. Is the quality quite as good as, like, say, this? Probably. I think these are made by Kentmore. Kentmore, that's high dollar stuff. You know, I cannot even imagine what this kit right here probably costs $500 if I had to guess. See that? Just heard it break loose, so now it should walk on out of there. Unless our tool just broke. Yes, sir. All right. And just for the record, we were not dissing anyone at Terre Haute last weekend, Nate.
Every single thing about it.
As a matter of fact, it's our stepsister over there or something like that. All right, so there's our bearing that we just pulled out of there. Let me release this thing here and we'll get it off this tool. So is this the camera we're showing stuff?
Yes, sir.
So like, can you see that? Or should I have Nate zoom in on that?
You can do it. Yeah.
Huh? Here, can you see how you got, there's a bearing right there. Then in between the bearing is a cage. Okay, now this bearing that we're getting ready to install, we can see the differences. So this has rollers all the way around the bearing, whereas the one that we pulled out does not have rollers all the way around. It's got a cage in there. So this bearing is more of a higher performance bearing, so to speak. It's gonna carry more load. While installing that, sometimes what'll happen, because we're gonna push on this to install it, these rollers in here will kind of get cockeyed, if you want to call it that. And you got to be real careful. I'll show you after I install it and make sure that didn't happen. But you got to make sure that these rollers are freed up and rolling, because if they're locked, they won't ever come unlocked and it won't work right. We're going to use the tool to install that. I have heard of people using hammers to install those. Don't ever use a hammer to install this. It comes with a forcing screw. This is going to sit on here like this. And then this is going to go through our plate, and we're going to walk it in. You see somebody just whacking it with a hammer. This could go in there. There's a real little bitty lip. You can just barely see that. There's a real little lip in there. And you could easily just push that bearing right in through the case. We had a twin cam that came apart and actually pushed the cam into the flywheel. And that's not good. It's a critical part that a lot of people, I'm not gonna say a lot of people, some people would overlook. If you're doing it in your garage or what have you, this is a critical piece of the cam compartment. It does get set to a depth, which I've got the book somewhere, and I will double check that depth. I always take a little bit of oil, just kind of lubricate that bearing. I've got a hold of it with my finger, keeping it on that tool, because sometimes they will fall off before you get to the case. So before I run that in there, I guess I can kind of explain how this works. Let me grab the old cam. So our cam sits in there like that. This end right here sits in that bearing that we're replacing right now, and the other end of this camshaft sits right here in the end of the cam support plate, or in the cam support plate. So it's supported on this end by the cam support plate, and it's supported by the other end by that bearing that we were just talking about. That's why you got to replace that. I don't care how many miles are on the bike, replace that inner cam bearing. Where's my... And this is where it can get tricky, because you got to do this by feel. This is going to walk in, and then it's going to get tight. You don't want to go too far past where it gets tight, because it can destroy the case. You can push it right through the other side. See, I'm going to stop right there. Okay, so in the book, which we have, it shows us how to, this is no secret what I'm doing, it's just, it shows us exactly how to install this bearing, okay? It gives you a depth. We're gonna measure that depth as far as how far in we want that needle bearing to go. And I think right here, the support plate thickness, which is a 1/2 inch, we add that to 3.737. So I've got my vernier calipers over here, and we're gonna measure that. All right, where are we at here? We're at 4.315. So we're gonna do some simple math here. Let's everybody math together. So we got 3.737, and we're gonna add to that the thickness of this plate, which as I said was a 1/2 inch, so that's 0.500. So we've got 4.237. 4.237 is what we're after. I don't think we had that. Or maybe we did. Okay, yeah, we did. We have 4.315. So we are good. Our bearing is in at least to this depth, 4.237. Has to be in at least that far. We've got it in just a little bit further than that. That's setting up where that cam's gonna ride. You don't want it too far this way because then the cam's gonna hit it and it won't free spin. We gotta have that depth set correctly. So that's perfect. We got that set where we wanted it. First try. Now then, what I was talking about, I think this one might have done it. Yeah, this one did it. So those rollers in there will not spin. All I did was force that bearing in with the tool, special tool. I didn't hit it with a hammer. I did it the exact way that the book says to do it. And those rollers in there will not spin. I don't know what would happen to that cam. I would assume that they might break loose eventually, but there's gonna be some accelerated wear on the end of the camshaft if we don't get those unstuck. And the way that I have found to do that is to take our puller that we used earlier, and we're gonna snug it up in there. And I'm just gonna rotate it back and forth and try to get those rollers to break free. See if we did it. Yep, look at that. So all I did, I stuck that in there, and now these rollers, I don't know if I can use my screwdriver, if that'd be easier, will spin. See that? So now the rollers are freed up, so they'll move. It's just something to look out for. Shoot. I'm gonna lube that bearing before I forget. Go ahead. And we have done that before. This is a brand new tool and I haven't put any paint on it. The last one we had some paint around that area, which is never a bad idea, especially if it's your tool. But if it's not your tool, now you're kind of putting, I don't know, your fate in somebody else's measurements, you know, that they got it installed correctly. Yes, it is a way to save time. So what I just used there is some Screamin Eagle Assembly Lube. I love this stuff because it's like molasses. It is real sticky. See how that just, I mean, it's It's awesome stuff. So I just put some in that bearing right there just so we don't have a dry startup. I'll probably put some on the camshaft as well. The reason I like this assembly lube is, like I said, it's thick. So, perfect example, this motor is not going to fire up today or tomorrow. So as sticky as that stuff is, it hangs on to the parts. This bike can sit here for 3 months. And when we go to fire it up, that assembly lube is going to be right where we put it. So we don't have a dry startup. That's why I like that stuff. All right, so our bearing's in and lubed. Let's see, we could talk about the oil pump next. The oil pump that we're going to install is this updated one here. There was some questions last week about the oil pump update. So there's a little nub right here. That nub is what is the identifying mark that this is the updated plate. This one right here does not have one of those. This is the one that came out of it. So I'm going to show you the difference. And I don't know, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know why they did what they did, but as you can tell, they have changed these pockets. So this is the one I pulled out, and you can see the shape of these pockets, how they're different. I think the depths are actually a little bit different too. I think this is a little deeper than this. So I don't know why they did it. I would assume that it is going to improve the ability of this oil pump to move oil through the motor and get it back out of the crankcase so we don't have our flywheels running through a bunch of oil. But this is available. Like I said, Harley will, I believe it's as long as your bike is in warranty, there's a form that we can fill out, and if we're installing a stage 3 or a stage 4, you got to put this in. I believe this comes factory on the 20s. I think 2020 already has that in there. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
I did some research because of that.
And it's already in there. Yeah. Yep.
2020.
Yeah, this is a 19. So, yep.
That's why I asked you last week about that.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? You made a comment to me that kind of struck a chord about a noise.
Yeah.
The vibrating noise. Yeah, and that got me thinking about that gasket right there.
It was rattling on the machine surface on the other side.
Right.
I think is what it was. I read about it.
Well, and I actually took one apart in 17 when these things came out because I heard a buzzing. It was a brand new street glide. I set it up and took it out for a test ride.
Was it a Circlip
And
that did it?
no, it was all time. I got back from the test ride and you could just sit there with it running. It's just like a bzzz, almost like a buzzing noise. And I ripped it. It sounded like a chain or a tensioner or something is what it sounded like. And we ripped into it, and there wasn't anything wrong with it. Couldn't find anything. Called tech services, and we went ahead and replaced the chain and the tensioner, put it back together, and the noise was still there. And you said something about it vibrating, and I'm wondering if that had something to do with that.
I read an article. That's what the guy had changed in his, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's because of the seal. It's
Yep.
vibrating against the machine surface.
Yep. And that makes total sense.
There wasn't
See
nothing
that?
on his bike either.
See what we're doing? We're learning together. I like that. That's what it's all about. So yeah, we're going to install this new oil pump in this one because this one actually comes with new gears.
Okay, Mr. Booth. I've got a gentleman with a 2019 Road King Special. Does Harley have to install the new pump in order for him to get it, or can he make a claim and install it himself?
No, I think it has to be done by Harley.
Yeah, I don't think they recalled it either. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, did they recall it? They didn't. But everybody's having the same. They were having that overflow problem too when they moved something.
Yeah.
It was going into the bottom of it or something.
Yeah, and I think that's why they changed those scavenge ports to made them bigger so they could get more oil out of that bottom end. So, need to get these O-rings out of here. This oil pump, okay, this is the flange or the spigot, I guess, if you will, and that's going to go into that hole right there, and there's an O-ring that we're going to install in that hole. Take a little oil out of there, just like that. Let me grab the O-ring for that.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
What does it cost to go to school for this?
And where'd you go?
Oh, hell. To go to school, I went to MMI, Motorcycle Mechanics Institute. And I went there a long time ago. It was probably 03, I think, when I went there. 03 or 04, there's that O-ring. That O-ring just sits in there like that. So when I went through there, I want to say it was like 20 grand.
Did you get a grant?
I think, yeah, especially, we'd have to ask Ray. We got Ramon Rivera back there. He was in the Marine Corps, and he just got back from there. He didn't have a lot of good things to say about it because they've changed with everything that's going on. A lot of the stuff is virtual. And so you've got an instructor that is standing here telling you what he's doing, and you're watching the video from where you're standing. You know, and so you can't really see what they're doing. And I don't know how much it is. I think the cost has probably gone up a little bit since I went through there. No. So I got my schooling at MMI, and then actually I didn't come here right out of school. I went over to LA Cycles and worked for LA for a couple of years. Learned a lot. Those guys really took me under their wing. Learned a lot about the old stuff. I actually got a job in here as a parts guy in 06. April of 06 is when I got here. So you have to be in a Harley-Davidson dealership for, I believe it's a minimum of 5 years before you can attain your master level of status or whatever. Harley offers classes. So once you go to MMI, you get into a dealership. Harley they're almost week long. Most of them are 4 days long. And they've got them in Milwaukee. They've got them, they do dealer classes in Orlando, Phoenix, and I think a couple other places throughout the country. Your dealership has to send you there. The class alone, I think, is probably at least $700. It may be more. And most of the time you got a hotel that's involved, for 4 days. So the classes can get expensive. Most dealers, if they're gonna send you to a class, they're gonna make you sign an agreement saying that you're gonna stay at least for a year because they've invested in you. But last time I checked, there's probably at least 8 or 10 of those Harley classes, I would say, that you have to attend. I actually just got done watching a video before I came out here for the Pan America. There was 4 videos that everyone in the dealership has to watch so that they're knowledgeable on the Pan America, and then there's a video that the master techs have to unlock and we watch that has to do with the engine. And I've got a lot of that stuff on my mind with what they're doing with the variable valve timing and stuff. It's crazy, But they want us to keep up on it, so we're knowledgeable on the product. Trike, when the trike came out, Harley offered a class. You went up there, you disassembled a trike. About a year ago, I went up there for a live wire class. And the live wire class is only for masters. It's not really a pass-fail class. It's a product knowledge. So the battery replacement on the live wire, that's that big, huge block in the center, that you replace that at the class. And so you completely blow the thing apart, and it's all learning, learning the bike. And I actually did one when I got back here. We had to do one for Mannheim Auctions. But yeah, they want you to be knowledgeable on it. So you've got to go, they want you to go to MMI. But Nate here, our cameraman, he did not go to MMI. I was reading in a Shop Talk. Harley-Davidson puts out, it's a publication called Shop Talk every so often, and it's just got a bunch of articles in it. And I was reading it. We were at the old store, so this has been at least 4 years ago, about not having mechanics, not being able to find good help. And so growing your own. So I've got a shop back there with 4 master techs in it. It's a perfect place to bring somebody in who isn't really brainwashed or, doesn't have bad habits like Nate. And we started from the ground up and showed him how to do, services, tires, stuff like that. And so now he's trained by 4 masters instead of, and I'm not dissing on, what they do down there in Orlando or Phoenix, but some of the talent that we were getting out of there, we hired like 3 in a row. And one of them cracked a transmission case, doing a oil change on a transmission, or he was doing a service and cross-threaded the drain plug on the transmission and broke the transmission case on a 2016 Slim. Bike only had 1,200 miles on it. We had to pull a transmission case out. So, and it's not to say that everybody coming out of that school and mistakes happen. I'm not, shit happens. LA used to tell me, you show me somebody that's not making mistakes, I'll show you somebody who's not doing a damn thing. You know, you just got to learn from your mistakes. Hopefully he did. You know, I make mistakes all the time, but it's, you know, we got to learn from them. But yeah, so that was why we kind of started farming our own mechanics, you know. But we ran into issues with Mike. I'm sure Mike's watching. He'd never worked in a shop that didn't have MMI trained mechanics. And after I explained to him why Nate hadn't been to school, you know, because he's got plenty of people to learn from back there, and we can kind of mold him the way we want him, it's actually worked out for us, I think.
Is that something you think that y'all can do it now?
I hope so, yeah. Yeah, it's like an apprenticeship program, kind of. I think it was like 8 weeks that we did it, wasn't it?
An 8-week schedule, and then I was basically on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, and we started basic, you know, like testing a battery, you know, pulling a battery out of a motorcycle on a bagger, a Softail, a Sportster, a Street, because they're all different, you know, and you just start basic. And wreck repairs, we had him doing some wreck repairs, because wreck repairs, the bike's already wrecked, you know, you're not gonna mess it up. And so it's a good way to learn. You're pulling off damaged pieces. You can see where everything's at. And that's one of the things that Ray noticed when he went to school, just from having worked here, how far ahead he was. We pay, and I've talked about it a little bit, paying attention to detail, where the zip tie is. You know, if you cut that zip tie, putting one back exactly where that one was. You know, I can pull off an outer fairing, and I can tell if there was somebody in there that didn't know what they were doing, because I can tell when stuff's out of place. So trying to pass that along to these guys, you know, it's not really something you can teach at MMI, you know. And MMI was beneficial to me for the theory. You know, they really go into how this stuff works, you know, the mechanics of it. And when you really do think about all of these metal pieces going together, and then this thing comes to life, you know, and runs, that blows my mind, the physics and engineering that goes into that. And that these guys thought of this stuff 100 years ago. You know, that stuff is really cool. And so for some people, going to school and getting that theory of how this stuff works is very beneficial. You know what I mean? I don't know if I can teach Nate that. He was in the Army.
Hey, easy.
I kid. We love our vets, especially our Marine back there. We've got crayons on.
Child,
yeah, we've got crayons on standby. Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question or not, but you know, I mean, I would love to keep doing it, especially with like vets, you know, bringing vets in and getting them in apprenticeship programs, and you know, showing them how we do this, because it is fun. We get to work on Harley-Davidsons. I'm gonna go ahead and set this oil pump in here before I get distracted
Back to
again.
the task at hand.
Yeah, figure out what I was doing here. Now I always put the backside gears in before I slide this in. They do have a flat that's going to line up with the flat on our crankshaft. So we're going to kind of get that started. There it goes. And see, it'll go back. And then I've got to shove this into that O-ring. There, just like that. It popped right in. And then these are our outer, they call them what, gerotors, I think. Well, I just messed up. See that? I got to talking. You know what we forgot?
Yeah,
The pretty critical part.
Yeah.
Yeah. See that? That's what happens when you get to talking.
You had fun here.
We try to have fun. Yeah. See, this only goes in one way, and I got to figure out which way that is. Let's see if these gears moved on us. There we go. There we go. Back in. So now our oil pump's in. There's an O-ring that goes right here. This plate's gonna go on after we get our cam in there, and this is all gonna mate up there like this. I tend to take some of this assembly lube and I'll put it in these gaps right here honestly, it's just habit is why I do it. So that there's something in this gap when we go to turn this motor over. Some of the people at Harley, I think, have said that you don't have to do that because this oil pump gets pressurized so fast that you don't even need to worry about that. It's just habit for me. That's what I do. I'm gonna get the cam, set the cam in there. Something.
Now how is that just a straight plug and play? And you slide it in, or you got to set that somehow?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah, I'll get into that. We'll talk about the timing.
That's what.
We'll talk about
That's what I'm here for the time.
the something that I do. I take my brake clean on a rag here. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but this cam has got like residual oil on it maybe or something. I like to get all of that off of there. So I'll take a clean rag with some brake clean and I'll clean all of this off of here. And then I'll put that Screamin' Eagle stuff on there.
It's crazy how those cams work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just,
They're all
you know, how it all goes together, you know, and,
One,
huh?
I've been a machinist 21 years.
Yeah.
I've machined cams before.
Really?
Different loads and stuff.
Yeah, I put that through.
I worked for Caterpillar. I've worked for Magvolvo Cummins.
Okay.
I did some government work on diesels.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
This is what I need to know, right?
Yeah, so I got that all cleaned off. And so now I just take some of the Screamin' Eagle lube. Hopefully, as long as we're not out. There we go. So I'll put that on there like that, and then I just kind of, this stuff is so thick, I'll just coat all of these lobes. And the reason I do that is because when this thing turns around, you know, there's going to be rollers from the tappets on top of these lobes. And I just don't want them going around there on a dry surface. I like to have these lobes lubed up. And so this cam just sits in here like so. Most of the time you put this gap right here to the top to start, so that cam just sits in there like that. Like I said, you don't have to do this, I don't think. Some people use oil. I like using this stuff because it's real thick, and I just shove that into those gaps on that so that there's not really any air pockets when we go to crank this thing up. Our oil pressure comes up immediately. Some guys, what they'll do when they build a motor is they will take the spark plugs and leave the spark plugs out when they get it all back together, and they'll turn the motor over with the spark plugs out of it so the bike won't fire, but you're spinning everything in here. And so sometimes you'll do it till the oil light goes out. So once the oil light goes out, you know that you've got pressure built up in your oil pump, and then you can put your plugs in and fire it up. So that O-ring goes right there. I'm actually going to take this support plate, pull this oil pan out of here a little bit. Now I'm just going to clean it off just a little. So we got that wiped off there. One of the other things I'm going to do is we brought this air out here. I brought the air out for a reason, because I've normally got air right by my lift. But all of these holes, sometimes they've got dry lock, that lock patch that we talked about last week that is on the bolts. Sometimes that'll get into these holes, and so I'll just take a little bit of air and I'll blow out some of these holes. just so that we've got the good thread engagement. Those are our tappet blocks up there. Where'd my rag go? And I'm just blowing these holes out. I want all of the excess Loctite, especially these ones right here that hold this tappet retainer in. Those are the ones that break all the time. Really want to make sure that that hole does not have any dirt or debris or anything in it, so that our bolt will go back in the way we want it to. So all of our holes are cleaned out. That's what we like. Now we can put our support plate on. Just slides right on. So you got crankshaft. If this bike had a bunch of miles on it, one of the things I was talking about with a customer last night that I might do, like if you've got, let's say 30,000 miles on your bike and you're doing some work like this, I would put a dial indicator on that crankshaft while this was off of here. And I'd roll the motor over and I'd see what that dial indicator said, because there is a spec on that that Harley has in the book. I could look it up, but I want to say it's 12 thousandths maybe is the limit. Like I said, I'd have to look it up. But if you're getting up towards that limit on your run out, it's a good idea to get your bottom end service while you're here, instead of doing all of this top end work and putting a brand new top end on a bottom end that's got 30,000 miles that may be towards the service wear limit. Because if that crankshaft gets too far out, I mean, our oil pump rides on it, you know, it could affect oil pressure. It could affect a lot of things. I actually just got mine done in my bike. I sent mine out. You can rebuild them. We can push bearings. We can change flywheels. I used a company up in Wisconsin called Dark Horse. They build a lot of hot rod stuff, and I sent my whole bottom end up to them with my junk flywheels in them, and they went through them. They replaced the bearings in there. They replaced my rods. But by the time it was all said and done, it was probably $1,500. You know, it's really not bad, because, you know, now you've got a bulletproof bottom end, you know, that you can, yeah, Dark Horse is up out there. They've been doing cranks a long time. They really, you know, when it comes to cranks, they know their stuff. So yeah, we're ready to bolt this in. If you notice, I've got a book right here. There is a sequence on tightening these bolts down, and we're going to use that sequence. We're also going to use some blue Loctite. And I'll probably go ahead and put this thing up on a jack. Because eventually we're going to need to roll this motor over. Yeah, I've got a jack. I'm putting the jack underneath it because when I get to bolting that cam cover on, or the cam support plate rather, you have to center that oil pump. So you'll snug the bolts up a little bit, and then we'll roll the motor over and let that crankshaft roll through that oil pump, and it kind of centers that oil pump, so the oil pump can find its center while it's still loose, instead of tightening everything down and it not being centered, and then it starts going through there. It's gonna wear. All right, we're still in gear. When we get ready to roll it over, we'll pull those rags out of there, because obviously we don't want to roll it over with rags in there. That'd be bad. So we've got our 4 oil pump bolts. You can tell that those are a lot longer. We've got our 6 bolts right here that are going to hold that support plate. Yes, Connor.
Will we be replacing the timing chain? How many miles do those chains usually last?
There's a lot of variables that go into that. How often do you change your oil? You know, because if you're running, if you change your oil often, they're going to last a lot longer than if you don't. Just like the old tensioners that were spring loaded. You know, we were replacing those at like 50,000 miles, but if you didn't change your oil, like at all, we'd have to replace them at 25,000 miles. Since we've gone to hydraulic tensioners, that's a hydraulic tensioner right there that runs against this chain, we haven't seen the kind of wear that we did out of the old ones. I'm replacing both of the chains on my twin cam. The twin cams have two chains. You've got one on the outer and one on the inner that drives the cams. I am replacing mine, and they've got 30,000 miles on them. Are they bad? No. But I'm rebuilding the whole motor, so I want them to be brand new. You wouldn't necessarily have to replace them, but for my peace of mind, I'm in there. I think those chains, I think this outer chain might be 30 or 40 bucks. You know, this bike only has 2,500 miles on it. This chain is not showing any wear at all. I mean, there's not even hardly any wear on this tensioner. You can see where it's starting to groove, that tensioner. I mean, if you took this apart and you could see real deep grooves in there, then you may think about replacing the chain. If you're going to replace the tensioner, replace it as a set. But when you get into replacing the chain, it's a good idea to replace the sprockets. That goes back to, you know, dirt bikes and everything. If you're going to replace your chain, you should replace your sprockets. If you're going to replace your sprockets, you should replace your chain. So I put Loctite on all of these bolts. And now we're going to start running them in where they go.
Are these sensitive torque spec?
Oh yeah, that's all I got the book here for. And yes, I do everything by hand. I know there's people out there that like to use power, and that's fine. I have nothing against that. I guess I'm old school, and I like the feel of running that bolt all the way in by hand. And before I get those tightened down, I am going to install these oil pump bolts. I'm just going to start them because those have got their own little sequence that we're going to go through here. And I'll probably walk through the book step by step just so we can show what it is exactly that we're doing. So yeah, install cam and support plate. We did that. We got the new O-ring on there. That's good. So we're going to tighten these screws 1 and 2, and sometimes this book is a little cattywampus with, but what it wants us to do is tighten the oil pump screws 1 and 2, which I think the cam plate actually has numbers on it. So there's a number 1 right there, there's a number 2 right there, there's a number 3 right there, and a number 4 right there. That's referring to just those oil pump bolts. So we're going to take screws 1 and 2 to 12 to 60 inch-pounds. So 12 inch-pounds is not a lot. 12 inch-pounds is 1 foot-pound. So honestly, just by me doing that right there, I'm probably where I need to be. I will get a torque wrench. See that? It's a torque wrench. A lot of people have forgotten what they look like.
Torque stick.
Yeah. So let's see, there's 50, 40, 30, I'll go to 30.
Hey, so why shouldn't I just...
There's 30, see I was almost there, just not even that much, and that's 30 inch-pounds. Go ahead.
So why shouldn't I just take an impact drill to all of these?
I'm not saying you can't. I mean, you know, you can use hammers on crystal too. Harley spends millions of dollars on research and development, and they come up with these sequences and these steps for a reason. I don't want to forget what I'm doing. But I want to explain as much of this as I can because it's pretty cool. Like even, okay, we've got a cam cover. This is our cam cover and how you torque the cam cover. Okay, and it has you bouncing around. I was at a Harley class and we had an engineer in there who was explaining to us how they come up with these torque sequences. People that used to write checks that had the carbon copy, that paper that's underneath the check, that paper actually has little bitty ink bubbles in it. And when you put pressure on it, you know, it breaks the ink. And so you've got that carbon copy. They take that paper and they'll lay that paper on this gasket surface and then they will bolt the cam cover up to it and they'll try all different combinations of torque sequences and they'll pull it off of there and check it each time. And whichever sequence gives them the seal that they're looking for all the way around is the one that they go with. Sequences are critical. I replaced a set of head gaskets on a Ford Explorer one time over at my dad's. And we got the head gaskets from, let's say, CarQuest. I don't remember who it was, but I installed it. The head gaskets were still leaking when we got done. I got a set of head gaskets from, let's say, Napa. They came with the same spec, but a different sequence. I went with a different sequence and it sealed them. You know, so I learned early on that sequences had a critical role in putting these things together. So along with using impacts, they don't tell you to use an impact in here. So I'm not going to use an impact. I'm going to use torque wrenches so that I know it's going back together the exact way that Harley says it should go back together. Now, do they use impacts at the factory? I don't know. They might. You know, they might. A lot of them may have calibrated, you know, torque wrenches or impacts or air guns, you know, that are calibrated to go to a certain torque. I've never been to York, so I don't know how they do it. But for me, I'm not going to use air just because, number one, I don't want to break anything. I don't want to distort anything. This is aluminum, and if you get this side tighter than this side and you can put stuff in a bind, and it's just not a risk that I'm willing to take on somebody else's motor. So where were we? We got our 1 and 2 oil pump screws tightened down. Now we got to rotate the crankshaft 1 full rotation. So the crankshaft is right here. So we're gonna, let's pull our rags out of there. I saw a move. I'm gonna leave these O-rings on there. I'm gonna see if those will stretch. There we go. So there's one. We can go another one just to. So what that did is that rotated those gears that were inside that oil pump that we showed when we put them, it rotated those around so that they can kind of find their natural center. So now we're going to tighten the rest of this cam support plate to 90 to 120 inch-pounds. I normally don't go to 90. I normally don't go to 120. I'll probably go to like 110. That's just personal preference. I don't kind of like to go in the middle. So we're starting with number 1 up here. 2's down here. And I'm looking at the book as I'm doing this. So I know which ones. Not only that, but when you follow a sequence, you don't miss any bolts. You don't leave anything loose if you're following a sequence. So there's 6. And so now we're back to the oil pump. That got our 6 support plates. Yep. Now we can final tighten our oil pump screws. So we'll go back here to this one. We're going to go up to 110. There we go. So right now our cam is in. The cam support plate is in and torqued. Our oil pump, our 4 bolts on our oil pump are torqued. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take these sprockets. And it's something like what you were talking about that you wanted to see. So you take this chain off of here. I just took it off. I'm going to lay it down. I know that that side's up, so I can put that back in the way it come out of there. I talked about that last week. Always put the parts that have already seen wear back in the exact same way. I don't have to worry about on the sprocket because the sprocket only goes on one way. Same with this sprocket. This sprocket's got a a timing mark. It only goes on one way. So this is a cam sprocket spacer. So this goes on right here. It's 110 thou. Yeah, this is 110 thou thick. So that goes on like that. We're going to leave the chain off, and we're going to put these sprockets on. They tell you to get, if I can see, there's that one. There's that one. I'm using old bolts. You could take, these are the bolts that we took out. You could take this over to the wire wheel and clean these bolts up and use these bolts. I've already got some. This bottom one, they tell you to get a just a washer, a stock washer, because this is the washer that comes on it, and that's a lot bigger than like this washer. So I'll put this one in here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna simulate this thing being in the motor. We're gonna tighten these up. The book tells you to go to 15 foot-pounds. And I'm putting it back together with the spacer that came in the bike. I need my locking tool. Another torque wrench. Yes, sir.
How often should we calibrate torque wrenches?
Nate, you want to take this one? Nate here used to do that.
About every year, you should make sure your torque wrenches are still in spec.
Once a year we take him out to the Snap-on truck. He's got a thing on his Snap-on truck, and he'll take this torque wrench and he'll set it at, let's say, 15 foot-pounds. He'll put it in his little machine, and it'll tell him, you know, it's at 14 and a half, or it's at 14 and 3/4, or something like that. Then he'll take it up to like 50 foot-pounds, because I think this torque wrench only goes to 75 maybe. He'll take it up to like 50 or 55, and he'll see where it's at. And I mean, if you're within a certain parameter, or
it's like it's a 5%.
5% plus or minus, or something like that, you're in the ballpark. Because these are not cheap to rebuild, from what I understand. Is that correct, Nate?
No, they're not.
Yeah.
They're really expensive really fast.
So 15 foot-pounds. Our crank sprocket is on there and tight 15 foot-pounds. Our cam sprocket is on there and tightened to 15 foot-pounds. So I'll pull my locking tool out of there. Sometimes you got to move the motor back and forth to get your locking tool out of there. So basically what we did is we just kind of simulated this thing being in and bolted up. We just don't have a chain on there. So I come over here. I've got a straight edge, little bitty straight edge. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to set it on the crank sprocket, and I'm going to rotate it up. Okay? And so what we're doing is we're checking the chain alignment. You want this chain to run as true as possible. We just changed the cam, so we've changed possibly where this sprocket is sitting. So that's why we got to check this. And I can tell that we're close, but there's a gap back here. So that's when you take your feeler gauges. I believe the book says it's 9 thousandths. Let's see here. Install original cam sprocket spacer, and then install using, you know, without the chain like we did. Tighten to 15 foot-pounds, lay a straight edge. Where does it say? Is it 9 thousandths? I believe it's 9 thousandths. Because the twin cams are 10 thousandths. For some reason they dropped it to 9 thousandths on these on the M8s. So you get your feeler gauge that's set to 9 thousandths, which is not a lot. I mean, it's, you know, that's pretty thin. And we lay this on here. Sometimes I've got to get way up on this to make sure that And see, I can get my 9/1000ths in there. So since I can get my 9/1000ths feeler gauge in that gap, this sprocket, this spacer back here needs to be bigger to bring this sprocket out a little bit more to line our chain up. So I'm gonna put my locking tool back in here. I always leave the crank sprocket bolted up to 15 foot-pounds because all I'm gonna do is pull this sprocket off. I'm gonna pull that spacer off. I'm gonna get a bigger one, and we're gonna try again. Sometimes what I will do is I will figure out which feeler gauge gets snug, and you can kind of do the math instead of doing this multiple times. You can say, okay, this is 110 thou. I need, instead of going to 120, you can jump right to like 130 if you know that you need it. And that does not want to come off of there. There's oil on it. I don't have a big magnet. There it is.
What's the guy do though if he does that and that kit comes through and that spacer's not thick enough? Do those come with the kit?
You'll have to buy this is a cam shim kit, I think is what it's called. Cam spacer kit. Yeah. And this will go all the way back to twin cams. Because you got to do the same thing with twin cams. And basically all we're doing is we're setting that chain so that chain is running as straight as possible. You know, because if the chain starts running at an angle, you know, you've accelerated wear. It's just like if you get a belt that's too tight. You know, that's why belt adjustment is critical. If your belt's too tight, it pulls on that front pulley, which is pulling on the main shaft, which is pulling on your clutch. I mean, it can cause issues all throughout. Just one simple adjustment, like a belt adjustment. This kit right here is open, so I don't know if it's got what we need in here. There's the 110, there's a 130, a 150, and a 140. So the 120 is the one that I used on the last motor that I built. So we're gonna try this 130 and see. We're gonna see if it's too much.
Press that bearing back there.
Could be.
Because if you don't press that deep enough, you're not going to have that
Right.
deep enough at all.
Yep. So we'll put this back on there like that. And we tighten this back down to 15 foot-pounds. Simulates being in, bolted in. And we'll check it again. Yep, see, so now when I go like this, I'm hitting. Okay, so that tells me that this sprocket is standing too proud. So the 120 is the one that I need. I put that 130 in there, I was hoping this would happen. So I do need that 120 thou thick washer. So we're gonna have to find one of those. I don't see a parts guy. Right? We need a service guy. Hey, Jarrett. Hey, will you have Obby see if we've got one of these kits? What's that?
Would not having a cam bearing seated correctly affect the spacer of the sprocket?
Absolutely. That's what we were just talking about. Whoops. My fluffy it fell down into the pocket there. Yeah, that's what we were actually just talking about. Was if you don't get that depth set correctly, that could definitely affect, you know, where this sprocket rides. And that's probably why they have you check it. You know. Now we're just waiting on parts. That never happens.
That's not normal at all.
Oh, that's not
It's funny because it's the truth.
Right. So yeah, that's the 130 thou thick.
That was too thick?
Yep.
Let me take it back and grind it down.
Wheel it down a little bit.
Start grind it. We'll get her down there. 12 thou on that crank is a lot.
Yeah, I don't remember what that is. That's the thing about having a book. If anybody's going to work on their own bike, make sure you get a book because this thing's got all the information in it. Awesome, thank you, sir. Yeah, so run out measured in the case is 0 to 10 thou.
10 thou?
Yeah. Well, like gear drive cams. A lot of people like to run gear drive cams. If you don't have perfect run out on a gear drive cam, instead of using this chain and sprocket, these would be gears on here meshed together. You could get whining, you know. It could be a nightmare if you don't have a good run out. So we'll get our 120 thou. And I think you can buy these individually instead of buying this kit. I think because there's a part number on this, so if you do the math or whatever and you know that you need the 120, you could probably come in and order just the 120 and not buy the whole kit, but Harley sells the whole kit to make it a little easier. I honestly have no idea how much the kit, the spacers is. So we're gonna put that on there, and I am gonna go ahead and just check it. Why not? We got time, right?
Time in the world.
Get in there. There you go.
My apologies if you've already answered.
Oh yeah, see, now we're perfect. Now we're gonna take our, I can already tell, it's gonna be hard for the camera to see and anybody else to see, but as you rotate this up, you can just barely see daylight between this straight edge and that sprocket. I mean, and so this 9 thou is not gonna go in there.
Is there a spec for that? Do they have a spec if they want?
For this right here?
For that
Yeah,
chain,
it's
for the
not
perpendicular
9 thousandths of an
9
inch.
thou is
Yep,
As much as you can go.
yep,
Okay.
yeah. So they take you take this 9 thou and they say that if you can get that 9 thou in there, go up a size.
Yeah, they want it
You know,
snug,
yeah.
at 9.
Well, and it's just for that chain alignment, you know.
Choose the sprocket, but it ain't right.
Yeah. So now that we've got our alignment set, we got the right spacer that we want, we can take all of this back off of there, and then we're going to put our chain on, and we're going to time it. Not with a stopwatch. Which one? The old one?
No, the new one. In this kit.
Yeah, I'd have to look and see what the spec is on the new cam. What is it? It's a 5 something, I think. Is it over here?
I think it is too.
No, the stage 2, the 427.
So it's going to be like a 570 or something?
Yeah, I think it's a 515, it looks like.
5.
It's either a 515 or a 517. Yeah, they're both about 515 thou lift. So we know that that chain came off like this. So I'm going to put our chain back on our sprocket like so. You take this is your timing mark. There's a dot right there. And they tell you just to hold it just like this. So the dot is down at the bottom. You take this sprocket, and we're just going to set it in this chain. See how okay, it kind of moves around like that, but we've got that right underneath that. So you don't want it like that. You don't want it like that. You put it together like this, and bad things could occur. You could have push rods are going to be too long, causing valves to hit pistons, or it could be really bad. You really got to make sure that you get this thing timed correctly. You get one shot. We had a twin cam that the front cam bearing let loose, and so the front the cam was allowed to rotate or rock in there, and so the cam lobes are rocking in there, and it bent a push rod and shoved the valves into the piston. Bent the valves. It didn't damage the piston too much, but he pulled over. As soon as he heard it, he pulled over and shut it off. So this cam has got a wide flat, if you will, on the top of it. So does this sprocket. So it just slides on just like that. And then we may have to move our crankshaft just a little bit to get this bottom one. There's a flat on the bottom sprocket. There it is. It slid right on, just like that. Yeah, I'm timing it right now. That's just like that. Nope, you don't need to get a timing light out. Nothing. That's it. That's it. And that's, you know, that's why I want to show people. You know, yeah, it's yeah. But if you get it one off, you know, then yeah, it could be.
There's no fine tuning to it.
Nope, that's it.
Is in time right now.
That bike is in time right now. We're gonna bolt these sprockets on, which do I have a bolt kit?
I guess you probably didn't do it. What if you wanted to run it retarded? Is there ways of setting it like that though?
I don't believe so.
Huh?
I don't think so.
It's not, is it?
No. That Pan America video that I just watched, that new motor, it's a Revolution Max, I think they're coming out with. Oh yeah, I can't really talk about that, can I?
Did you just sign up?
Yeah, I did. look for, it's going to be cool with some of the stuff that's coming down the pike. You know, yeah. Yeah, it's only a few days away. Yeah, but yeah, the timing. I mean, that's as easy as it is, just like that. Yep.
If you do it that way, you're not going to junk, no valves, no nothing.
Nope.
As long as you get everything.
Yep. As long as you get those timing marks set up like that, you're good. So I do need a cam drive gear retention kit, and I don't see it out here.
Hey, how much in tools? What's the price range in tools?
What?
What's the price range?
You're talking about specialty tools.
Yeah, specialty tools. Do you think?
Specialty tools?
Buying all the tools you need.
I don't even have all the tools. You know, I don't buy them because I've got them here at the shop. There are mechanics that will go and spend the money, but you're talking big money. I mean, like this kit that I used to pull that cam bearing in and out, that kit could be $500 and some odd.
So we're talking 5-10 grand?
Probably easy. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's sockets that they use different parts of the motorcycle, and one socket could be $300. You know.
On that chain, is there a tolerance now for the tension on it? Standard?
Well,
wiggle it a little bit?
when I get these bolts in here and get this all bolted up, this tensioner is going to bolt right here, and this is oil fed. So oil pressure is what's going to hold the tension on our chain there. And that's a newer design because the 06 and earlier, the old twin cams, this had a spring on it, and it was spring loaded to the chain. And so there is no back and forth. It's just kind of like all or nothing. And that's why we saw a lot of wear on the older style chain tensioners.
So I have two questions. Chain drive or gear drive, which is quieter? And then HD offers torque cams and horsepower cams on the 131. What's the difference?
Well, ideally one's going to give you more horsepower, one's going to give you more torque. Getting back to chain drive or gear drive, gear drive really hit the scene when we were having issues with the old tensioners. The old tensioners would come apart and you could destroy oil pumps. It could go bad in a hurry. So one way to get rid of tensioners is to go to gear drive cams. And when people talk about gear drive cams, instead of using chain and sprockets, there's a gear like you have in your transmission. and it meshes with another gear. And so these would actually be touching. They'd be, working together instead of a chain and sprocket. I touched on that a little bit. If your run out on your crankshaft is a little bit more than what it should be, this gear could be, you could have gear whine. Carlos, he was a service manager here for a while. His dad has got an 01 Ultra, I think, and it's got gear drive cams in it. And I guarantee you that everybody standing here, if we fired it up, we could hear it. We would know that it had gear drive cams in it just because you could hear the whine coming from the cam compartment. Are they good? Absolutely, especially for older bikes like that you don't want tensioners. Harley has since ditched the old chain tensioners and gone to the hydraulic style. Twin cams had a hydraulic tensioner back here because we had 2 chains on twin cams. And since we've gone to hydraulic in 07, I think everything went to hydraulic. We haven't seen near the issues of chain tensioners going bad or any issues with that. I like the chain and sprocket with the tensioners myself just because I don't like the whine. It could be personal preference for some people. If you want to run gear drive cams, run gear drive cams. You just got to, like I said, you got to make sure that your tolerances are within spec so you don't have issues with the meshing of the gears. I like this. It's simple, it's easy, and it's what Harley says to use. You can update your older twin cams to hydraulic tensioners also. They have a Screamin Eagle kit. It's like $500, I think, and you can take your old cam plate out that had the spring-loaded tensioners on it, and you can put the new cam plate in. Most of the time, it's got a higher volume oil pump, I think, with it. Or I know you can get that. They sell the billet support plate with a higher volume oil pump that can go in with that, and so you can have the new technology in, like, say, an 03 or an 04. You can update it to the newer stuff. Does that answer your question, I think? Okay. We still don't have a parts guy, do we? Nope. Still waiting on a cam drive retention kit. Let me see if I can. There's literally nobody over there, and I don't want to walk too far away because I'll ruin your microphone, won't I?
What do you need?
A gear drive retention kit, a cam gear retention kit. Hey, Tierra. Abby. I need some parts. 2.5, what is it? The cam drive retention kit. 25566-06, I think.
Just flex on it.
Huh?
Just flex on it.
It's something that we use all the time. Shut up.
Just teasing.
I guarantee you my brother would know it. He'd rattle it off. And what they're getting for me is basically this bolt and this bolt with these washers, but they're going to be brand new, and they're going to have a dry lock patch on them. The guy that I learned a lot from, you probably can't see it, but there's oil in the center of the crankshaft where one of these bolts up. And if we use, like, say, red Loctite, awesome. Go ahead.
One?
Yep, that's it. Is it 25566? Yeah. Thank you, Tierra. Will you put it on Kyle's RO? All right, thank you. So, I'll get this open here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. These washers are different. You don't want to mix them up. But see, there's a dry lock patch. That's a red lock patch. So that's basically dried Loctite that they use. Could you clean these old ones up and put some red Loctite on it? You probably could. It would probably be okay. The reason that, and I'll tell you why we started doing this, is the guy that I had learned from, there's oil in this, where these threads are, because you've got oil in the center of the crank. So when this dry lock patch goes in there, these bolts go in and they get torqued to 15, and then we back them off one full turn, and then we go to a different torque spec. So our thought was that the dry lock patch is going to push that oil back into the crankshaft. It's going to create like a hydraulic lock or a hydrolock, or is that what you call it, a hydrolock, where it's gonna, the oil is not gonna be able to get past that dry lock patch. Whereas if this was a liquid Loctite, like that come out of a bottle, that liquid could just push up the threads. And our thought is you're gonna get better engagement using this dry lock patch than you would, like, say, liquid Loctite. I always take a little bit of oil and I put it on both sides of these washers just so that they spin. You got to make sure, like I said, they are specific as far as which one goes to the top, which one goes to the bottom. The big fat one goes on the top. The big skinny one goes on the bottom. So yeah, see that right there already got kind of snug running in. So I know that lock patch is working. And if you look at the book, it tells you they both go to 15 foot-pounds. Put our lock in there. There it is. That's a special tool also. So taking this one to 15, take our cam to 15. Eventually. Okay, so they're both at 15. Basically, it just kind of sets everything up there. So then we take them and we loosen them one full turn. Just like that. Now both of them have been loosened one full turn. Let's see, the bottom one is gonna go to 24 and the top one goes to 34 foot-pounds. There's 24. There's 34. So our cam is tight and in there. Now we're going to install our tensioner. These tensioner screws, I always put just a little bit of blue Loctite on the screws for the tensioners. These are going to go to, I believe it's 90 to 120 inch-pounds. Yep, 90 to 120 inch-pounds. I need a T27. So this is just going to sit like that. See how that doesn't want to go over there just yet? I'm going to wait till I get the bolt ready. See how you can push on it? That's where it gets its pressure from. The oil works the same way, pushing that out. There's a little spring down inside there and underneath the piston. Where's our torque wrench? Right there. We should be still set to 110. Yep. Just like that. So at this point, the cam's installed. The spacing has been checked. Chain's tight. Now is when I would install the cover. And I install the cover just because that's the way that I do it. Some guys would go ahead and maybe put the tappets in now. I always get the cover on first because the way I'll show you how I pump up my lifters before I put them in. I've got an oil can over here, and I will take the new lifters and I'll take my oil can and I'll pump them up. And so there's oil that'll be running off my lifters. And if you put oily lifters down in there with your cam cover still off, that oil is going to run down and it's going to make a mess. And I just prefer to have the cam cover on and tight, and then I put my tappets in.
I watched a guy
Take the air out.
Basically what I do is I'll have them over here because I do it kind of over my drain pan, but there's that hole right there in the center. That's where the oil comes up through the push rod, gets to the top of the motor. Okay, that's where that's how your oil gets to the top of the motor. It comes through the lifter. It goes up through the push rod. Yep. So the other side of the lifter, I don't know if you can see, there's a hole right here. There's a groove around here, so that oil is going to come in around this groove, and it goes up through this hole right here and out the top. So technically, you could probably put this right here, but my oil can fits right into the center, and so I'll start pumping it up, and you can watch all the bubbles come out of that little hole. That's actually a feed hole.
That take the air out.
Yeah, it's basically just kind of like priming it.
Yeah.
Do you have to do it? Probably not. I had one of the really smart guys that worked for Harley, HB was his name. He saw me doing that one day over at the old shop. He was in our shop, talking to David about some stuff, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just priming my lifters, that's all." He's like, "Oh no, you don't have to do that on the mates." He's like, "Those things pump up, in milliseconds or whatever," which I believe him. He says I don't have to do it. You probably don't have to do it. It's just a habit. I like having that oil in there. That way there's not that air pocket, so to speak. Yeah, a dry startup. Because after I pump it up, I'll I'll pump some on the roller, and I'll spin the roller. I'll show you how I do it. And I kind of spin the roller so that I've got oil basically all over that tappet. There's no dry metal, when I set it in there. I don't.
No, they have, like I've seen on some cars, like the Mustang, the rubber inside, and if they ever hang, you can put them in a vise.
Yeah.
Is that the same way that those are?
Really? I've never had one of those apart. You talking about on the outside of the lifter?
No, on like the inside, it's like on hydraulic.
Oh, inside here? Mm-hmm. I've never had one of those apart, to be honest with you. I've seen them stick. Mm-hmm. Actually, Dalton had a set in his Dyna, and I took it. He had valve train noise like crazy, and we thought it was the push rod had come loose. We adjusted the push rod, and it continued. And this plunger right here was not coming all the way back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen an old mechanic, you can put them in a vise.
Yeah.
Vise them a little bit and oil them, just like you're talking about, pump the oil.
And it frees them up.
Yeah, it'll actually unfreeze them.
In a bind, I would probably do that. Here, I'm just going to put new lifters in it. I think we talked about that last week because Harley actually says, you get to like 10, 15,000 miles on your lifters, especially if you've got a cam that's working them a little bit more. It's a good idea to replace them after 10, 15,000 miles. A lot of people think that replacing these tappets would be an arm and a leg, but in all reality, especially on twin cams, all you'd have is just the top rocker gaskets because you unload the rockers and then you can slide the push rods out and you can get your tappets out. This one's a little bit more difficult because we get that oil line that we had to take off of there to get the covers off. So it's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, right now I'm going to go ahead and get my cam cover on, and after we get the cam cover on, I'll show you exactly how I pump those up. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, I saw these holes on this header last week are for the small O2 sensors. No, you're fine. Yeah, I was talking with some guys, and actually Zach and Mike, about the auto-tune module, because we had run into it a long time ago where we had holes, and we didn't think you could run an auto-tune module. I went into the dyno, and they actually do have a map for a 131 and an auto-tune module. Well, it wouldn't work until you open these up, because the Harley ATM actually uses wideband O2 sensors that can tune a little bit further than the narrow band. The ones that go in there, the smaller ones are the narrow band. Wideband is like what we use to sample air fuel in the dyno. It's a more precise way of measuring the fuel and oxygen. Mike, the guy that was here last week, said that in Boston they had a welder, and they would actually put different bungs in, the bigger bungs. Zach said that I think Harley makes a kit. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the Harley kit to open these up. So there might be a way to take this hole and open it up so that the bigger one would fit in there. Yeah, because I would much rather be running an auto-tune module just for that reason, because you're within warranty, and if you have a set of slip-ons or something, it will give it a little bit more fuel than just a street tuner.
Why they did it, what their purpose was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Their engineering purpose.
Right.
something to it.
Yeah. Yeah, because Harley's got the deep pockets. When it comes to R&D,
Yeah.
they spend a lot of money.
Only that smartphone, bud.
Well, I went to the trike class that I went to up at Harley. We had a guy working with us that worked at the proving grounds out in Arizona. And some of the stuff that they do on these, out at the proving grounds is ridiculous. I mean, he said that you could be on a trike out on a blacktop parking lot in Arizona. You're in full leathers and a full face, and all you're doing is backing up a hill and rolling back down, backing up a hill and rolling back down for like 6 or 8 hours. I mean, they put these things through the ringer.
Cummins does it with all their trucks.
Yeah. I can't imagine. And then he said Lifeline is there at least once a week. So that's,
Lord. Where'd they get that right?
that's kind of a turnoff. Yeah, you can make $25 an hour, but
Twist the throttle on you.
yeah, we want you to let go of these handlebars and hit this speed bump. I just took some brake clean, just put a little brake clean on a rag, and I just kind of go over my gasket surface, just because I can't stand it when I got oil on my gasket surface.
Yeah.
That's that cardboard that I put there last week so that oil that ran out of there didn't get all over our wiring harness and seep down in there and make a mess. I'll take my cam cover, I'll spray it off just a little bit, get all that oil out of there so it doesn't run down. And again, I'm just kind of looking at that gasket surface, making sure there's not, any part of the old gasket on there or anything like that. That one looks pretty clean. Need our cam cover bolts. I do run blue Loctite on the cam cover bolts. You don't need a lot, just a little bit. Those are our Tappit block keepers. So this gasket only goes on here one way, just like that. You try to put it on the other way, and it ain't gonna line up. It's not gonna work. So that gasket only goes on one way. So I'll hold it like that. Sometimes I'll just put this top bolt in here, and it kind of holds your gasket
Is there 2 techs in
just
there?
like that. So there's our one bolt's in. Just make sure our gasket doesn't move around. Again, there's a torque spec and a sequence on this cam cover. We're going to use the sequence so that we get the best seal out of that gasket. They use sequences on everything. Primary cover gaskets, rocker box gaskets. And the sequence is there for a reason, so you get that best seal out of the gasket. Instead of just taking your wrench and just going around in a circle and tighten all the bolts in a circle, we're going to tighten this cover down evenly. There it is. I just run them all in kind of finger tight. And I am going to look at the spec on this because I don't remember it. I'll try not to remember specs. Camshaft cover screws go to 90 to 120 inch-pounds. So we should be set at 110, and 110 is just shy of 120. And we've got a sequence. Tells us exactly how to go. There's our sequence right there, and we're going to follow that exactly. So we'll start up here. So I know I got 9 bolts. I know there's 9 numbers in the sequence. So another benefit of the sequence is now you know that you've gotten all of the bolts tight and there's nothing left loose. And just like that, our cam is in. We're ready to rock and roll with the tappets. We'll get the tappets in, get the tappet box on. And then we might have time to sit down and get some pistons set up. We'll get the piston rings on. I'll show you how we do that because there is some pretty cool stuff that we double check on the pistons and the rings. Move this. Get some of this stuff out of the way here. What? That's fine. Yeah, we got plenty of time. We'll see what happens. See how far we can get. Probably don't need this anymore. See that? And the only reason I put that in there is so that this right here doesn't get all oily and nasty, because then you'd really have to take your brake clean and spray in there and spray all that stuff out of there. It's just another one of the little things that we try to do to keep the bike clean. Probably don't need that drain pan anymore either. Oh yeah, I do too. We're gonna pump those lifters up. So I'll get my lifters over here. Already got my oil can. So I think I've got just regular 2050 in this oil can. So that's our feed hole. So if I just start pumping this full of oil, eventually, see that? See those bubbles that came out of there? Just like that. So now I know that there's oil in that lifter, and I'll just kind of go like that. Then I'll spin that roller around, get all that oil in there. I don't like a dry startup. We'll just drop them down in the lifter board, just like that. See, there's not a lot of air, but there is air. Get that done just like that. A lot of different companies make lifters, different oiling. I know Fueling makes some, Jim's makes some. This kit comes with Harley, so we're gonna use Harley. Get that in there and it just slides right down. There we go. There we go. All of our lifters are primed, not really pumped up, but I at least got a little bit of oil in there just to prime them. So then we put our keepers back on. These are basically it's an anti-rotation device. there's flats that are cut in this. It's not perfect circles. And there's flats on these lifters. So that's what keeps these lifters from rotating. There's even a little F marked on this for front. There's an R marked on this one for the rear. So you can't, I'm not gonna say you can't get them backwards because anything's possible. There are other companies that make different keepers. This is just kind of like a plastic. It's got like a metal spacer in there. I know some of the motors that we've built, they have these in billet. I think S&S makes them in billet. Is it worth the money? Sure. Anywhere where you can, you know, I would trust billet a little bit more than plastic, but like I said, again, Harley has spent big money on R&D, and if Harley says that works, it's gonna work, you know. These are those bolts we took out of there. I had Ray clean them all up for me, so there's no Loctite left on there. We sprayed those holes out, so I know that we got the Loctite out of that hole. So I'll put just a little bit of blue on this bolt here. That's a 3/8. And let's double check the torque spec on that. I think it's still the 90 to 120, but I want to be certain. Anti-rotation device, yes, 90 to 120 inch-pounds. Again, I like that 110. That's where I go. I don't want to take it all the way to 120. Can you? Sure. Just like that. That one's done. Get our rear in there. Put some blue Loctite on the bolt.
When you're ready.
What's that?
Let me just get rid of it.
We use a lot of brake clean. It's basically just like alcohol. Helps clean all the oil. Get these gasket surfaces cleaned up. I don't like any contamination on my gasket surface. Like these grooves right here, I always clean these out because there's going to be O-rings that sit in there for our push tubes or push rod tubes. I just like to have everything clean. We need the gaskets for our tappet blocks.
I asked him how to get out of mine.
That's Brandon right there. It's Dustin.
Huh?
Oh, we're talking about buying this red thing.
No.
I don't want it. I'm a fat Bob guy.
These gaskets will only go on here one way. And I believe it is the same gasket. You flip one over, I think is how it works. Like this one works over here, and then you flip it over and it works over here. Again, all of our bolts that we pulled out earlier today, I had Ray take them all over to the wire wheel. He's cleaned them all up. I mean, we got a nice clean bolt there. So we can put some Loctite, blue Loctite on these bolts. And that's what's going to hold our tappet blocks on. You may notice I shoved those rags back in there. And the only reason I shove those rags back in there is because I'm putting these bolts in right here. Somebody honks a horn or fires a bike up and it backfires and scares me. I don't want to drop that bolt down in there because then I got to go fishing. Because you would definitely have to get that bolt out of there before you fire this up. And I like installing these before the cylinders are on so that I can use a squared Allen socket. If you're trying to do this with the cylinders on there, these back bolts right here, you're definitely going to have to use a ball Allen socket, and you'll be coming at it from an angle like this. And when you come at it from an angle like this, a lot of times you'll mar up the bolt. It just kind of, it's a cosmetic thing. It doesn't quite look as nice. You can tell somebody's been in there, you know, so if you pull up next to somebody at a stoplight, like, no, man, I haven't gone into there, and they see marks on these bolts, like, well, somebody's been in there. I don't think I'm going to race you for a pink slip. Let's see, torque spec.
Does Harley loan out any specialty tools, or do you have to buy them in the catalog or online?
Yeah, you just kind of got to get them where you can. I don't know if they offer any. Some of them are in the Screamin' Eagle catalog, I think. They do offer a few. I don't know which ones.
But you guys wouldn't, you don't have any.
We normally don't loan them out. A lot of times I don't even like new guys using them. You know, because if you don't, you can easily break a tool.
Yeah, but I didn't know if
you
you
know.
had an extra set, like, you know, like some of the, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like AutoZone will let you rent. No, we don't do that.
Blueprints on that bearing cord.
Let's see. Lifter cover screws go to 132 to 156. So I'll probably go to like 140. So what, 156? I might go to 142. And they don't have a sequence on these, but I'm still gonna kind of jump across. Again, using a torque wrench. Right, Nate?
Torque stick, yes.
Is this your music? We have fun here, right?
Oh yeah, all the time.
HR nightmare. There we go. Tappit blocks are on. So basically everything in the cam compartment we're done with. All this stuff is done until we're ready to put our push tubes in. And I won't put the push rod tubes in until I've got the cylinder heads on. That'll be when I install those. So actually what I will probably do is I'll take one of these rags and I may just lay it over just like that. Not to say anything would ever drop down in there, but if something drops down in there and I don't know about it, I don't know to get it out of there, you know? So I always just lay something up. You could tape them up until you're ready to put the push tubes in. Just what you don't want anything to get down in there. So yeah, now we are on to the next step that I would tackle is to get pistons on our rods. And before we get pistons on the rods, there's some stuff that we got to do. I like to have the rings on the pistons before I install them. I think they're easier to install on the table than they are to install once you get it on the bike. Not only that, but I like to have the piston because I'm going to check our ring in gap. It's one of the things that we can still check. Harley offers the spec on it. Let's see, here's our piston kits right here. Yep, right here. So you've got ring in gaps, and it tells you what your top ring, your second ring, and your oil control ring, what those in gaps should be. I always double check them just in case there's a ring that gets thrown in there that's not supposed to be in there. And if I didn't check it and there's no ring in gap, I'd never know. It's just something that I do. What we used to do, something I did with mine, is I would take this cylinder and they make what they call torque plates. And so a torque plate is a big piece of metal that would go on the top here, and there'd be another big piece of metal that would go on the bottom here with long bolts that went through connecting them. And when you tighten those bolts down, what the torque plates do is it simulates the cylinder being in the bike. You're torquing it down like it's in the bike. Because the cylinder is not really a perfect cylinder. It's kind of beveled at the top, and as you shrink it down, it becomes a circle. So in order to measure the cylinder, you would want it to simulate being in the bike. That's why they have the torque plates. They don't make torque plates for these, or we haven't found any torque plates for these. We ran into it when we were doing the, I think it was the 110 Fat Boys, and that you could take to the 117, I think. We did a couple of those kits, and we went to measure the cylinders, and Harley Tech Line told us on the phone, the instructions don't say to measure them, do they? It says install them. So that's what they don't make torque plates, or Harley doesn't have torque plates that are this big. So we just install the cylinders. Some of the other things that we can look for, the gasket surfaces. You make sure that this is smooth. I had one that came in and it was probably just a machining flaw, but this surface, you could run your fingernail across it and it was not level. We had to get a different cylinder, brand new out of the box. So you got to pay attention to some stuff like that. They're human too. We all make, you look away from a machine for a second or something and you don't see it. It only takes a second, but it may have been, I don't know if they spin these sleeves in, because this is a sleeve. I don't know if you can see the different metal right there. You've got a sleeve that's down inside this cylinder, and the thickness of it is, it's not real thick. That's a real thin wall. We had the old cylinders. I can grab one of those. And you can see the difference in the cylinder's thickness, or the sleeve thickness. So that's how we get, from like 114 cubic inches to 131, as you take and you just bore this out. So they don't want us putting that in a set of torque plates. It may distort it, I don't know, but there's a reason they don't want us doing it. But with twin cams, I did it on mine. I can still put them in torque plates, torque them down, and then you get a dial bore gauge. And I would take a dial bore gauge and I would measure my cylinder. I'll measure my pistons. I can't do it on this one, but like I said, on a twin cam, I did it on mine. And the reason I'm doing that is because you've got like a 2 to 3 thousandths spec as far as fit in the cylinder. Your cylinder is going to be like 3 thou bigger than your piston, obviously, so it can move up and down. But say you've got one cylinder and piston that gives you 3 thousandths, and you've got one cylinder and piston that's like 2.5 thousandths. Okay, I would put the one that's bigger on the rear because the rear is going to get hotter, you know, so it's going to expand more. So I might put my loose fit piston on the back, and I'd put my tighter one on the front, just because the rear is going to get hotter. I can't really do that on this 131 kit because I can't measure these cylinders and pistons. We're just kind of putting a lot of our faith in Harley at that point. But like when we're building, I'm putting mine together. Mine's just a 103, and that's something that I did. I put the torque plates on, I measured my pistons, and then I did the dial bore gauge, and I found out it's not much, but it is a little bit. One cylinder or one piston might be a little smaller than the other, and you try to make those up. That's something that we do here. You know, it's kind of like hot rod stuff, making sure everything works together. So now I'm going to take this out of here. And one of the things that I can do that I was talking about is like my ring end gap. That's our old piston, this is our new piston. So our rings are measured out here. Well, they put them in packaging. And I believe they say, yeah, they got 1, 2, and 3 on them. So the 3, these are our oil control rings. You gotta be, this stuff is delicate. I mean, you gotta be real careful because you can snap one of these things. And I don't know all of the engineering that goes in behind these things, what they're made of, anything like that. So there is a gap on these. And so what I'll do is I'll just kind of set it down in the cylinder like this, and I'll take the piston, I'll flip it upside down, and I'll just kind of set it down in there so that the ring is down in there the same distance all the way around. So it's not like this, it's not like this. And you can't really see it, but there is a gap on that ring, and that gap is right there. And the oil control ring end gap is 0.0006 to 0.024. Right. So I don't even know if I've got a feeler gauge that goes down that small. But I know that I've got one that's like a, you know, let's see here. I got 0.0015.
Need a bigger gap if you boost the engine.
And yeah, so I've got a gap. And that's just something I'm just double checking to make sure that, because they do, on that note, when you're building hot rod motors, a lot of times what guys will do is they will buy oversized rings. And so if I were to put this in this cylinder, there would not be any end gap because the ring's too big and it's gonna come together. And they, Snap-on makes a little bitty ring file, and it's just got a little cutting wheel on it, and you just put that ring on there and you sit there and spin it and you make your own gap. Because, and that may be getting over some people's heads, but when you're getting into hot rod building and stuff like that, you want your specs to be on that tight side, you know, so you've got all that wear, you know. Those guys over there at Hendrick and down there in Daytona, they know all about that stuff. Yep. But they might be working in white lab coats, and, you know, I can't imagine their engine rooms, you know. Yeah, I mean this, you know, white floors, white lab coats, you know, no dust anywhere.
Controlled environment.
Yeah, and see it's just a little above and beyond. You know, some guys would just pull these out of the package, they'd slap them on the piston and go. It's just a little bit of an extra measure that I like to do just to make sure that I didn't get a bad part and that I do have end gaps.
Now, what's the purpose in that ring right there? Why is it digital oil?
So that's an oil control. So that's going to go on the very bottom. And so you've got oil, you know, down here, it's spraying up from the bottom with the piston jets. They got piston oiling jets. It's going to spray oil up to keep the bottom of the piston cool. And it's going to scrape along the cylinder and it's going to pull that oil back down before, like, say, our compression, you know, rings get down there to it so that they can seal. Yeah, like a squeegee, exactly. Yeah, just kind of cleans. I do know that, I don't remember what they call it. Is this oil? This goes in between these two rings. This will go on first, and there is a gap, or I don't know if you can see, but well, it's not going to overlap. It's going to come together like this, but it'll make an M when it comes together, or it'll make a W when it comes together. And the guy at Harley had told us you want the W for winter chicken dinner. And I think it has to do with if you have it down, sometimes on this piston, there are holes cut in this piston. And if it's down, and the rings will rotate on the piston. They're rotating all the time. We're gonna set them where they want us to, where you got a gap over here, a gap over here, and a gap over here when we install it. But eventually, as this motor runs, these rings are gonna rotate, and all of these end gaps will probably end up lining up. They're gonna go to the path of least resistance. That compression is just gonna line them all up. But I think it has to do with this ring having it could go around and it could get caught on one of these surfaces right here, and they don't want that. So they have you flip this up so it makes a W instead of an M, so that this can spin around and not catch anything. In theory, it shouldn't catch anything because this got this ring on the bottom of it. But I guess if this end gap came in contact with that gap, then it could technically maybe drop down out of there. And we don't want that. So I'm gonna go ahead and check the rest of these end gaps real quick. I don't wanna get these mixed up. A lot of times these will have dots or numbers, or it'll say, this one says top on it. You gotta make sure that you get your rings in the right direction. If you don't get rings in the right direction, they could smoke. Don't have compression. Yeah, I definitely got a gap on that one. Let's see, the second one is 18 thou is the low end. Yeah, and I've got 18. So I'm just making sure that I've got some sort of a gap there. That's the top one. Top one is 13. Again, I'm gonna pull this out of here. I'm gonna set it back down there because I know that that's my second. I don't want to get these mixed up. This one says top on it too. I don't know if you can read that or not, but it tells you which way is the top. When you get into these rings, and it's a lot of technology that's over my head. They got these different bevels cut in them. This one's like squared on the outside, but on the inside, it almost looks like there's a bevel all the way around the top right here. And again, I just use the piston just to kind of set it down in there so that I know it's kind of the same all the way around. I can see a gap, but I'm just gonna grab the 13 thou and just make sure that I've got at least the 13 thou. If I didn't have at least the 13 thou, then I would want to file this ring down and get at least my 13 thou end gap. And that could be caused, you know, if there was like a burr or something there on the edge of it. So I know that these are good. While I'm doing this, I'm gonna go ahead and check those.
Do you find that often that they do?
Not very often, but again, it's just that every once in a while. you know, you get in habits of how you do stuff. And sorry, Nate, is your hand, you got carpal tunnel setting in there?
It's all good. 2 pounds
You're,
is a lot after
you're a
3
champ.
hours.
These rings can be a pain when you're installing them. When you get them over there and you're trying to use your ring compressors, you got to be real careful with these oil control rings because you can bend one super easy. Yep. Okay, we're good on that. I've got ring compressors is what I'm going to use. Just, yeah, it's just a snap-on ring compressor set.
This one guy had machine beveled or tapered blocks.
Yeah.
Bolt onto it.
Yeah.
And shoved the piston right in there and just and it tapered the rings.
Tapered them as they went in.
And he knocked it out down the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Ran his pin through
Yeah,
it.
that's a good idea.
It was. They were machined to certain bores for certain
Yeah.
jugs.
Yep.
I don't know where he got them. I was like, man, I could probably do it at a machine shop.
Yeah, we got a guy works for us, Keith. Keith, he's a machinist. That's kind of a lost art.
It's been a long time. My grandpa did it. Yeah, it's like you're saying. See, you send them to school, but that don't give you an afford stamp.
Right.
That's what counts. Like I started my journeyman a long time ago in 2001. Then they took the journeyman program out of Cummins, and now everybody. He's a welder. He's been welding for a long time. That's another dying art. Like
Yep.
you're getting all these young kids that don't want to put their work in.
Well, and that's what we're trying to. We got one here. You know, we're trying to bring him into it.
That's the best way to do it, though, like that right there.
Yeah. Well, David, we'd actually reached out to. I think it was like Anderson High School
That's where we're
a couple of years ago.
Well, I'm from Brown County, but I live in
And,
Anderson now.
You know, trying to get some kids. You know, like high school programs. You know, where you have it's not
Automotive
kind of
is,
like work release, but I know when I was in high school, I got to my senior year, I could
Co-op.
leave. Yeah.
Co-op. I
And
did
get job experience
did
and get
machine.
people in here, you know, and show them how to be, you know, a mechanic, a welder.
That's where
you
I
know.
started machining was in high school.
Absolutely.
And I kept doing it once I graduated.
And
It pays
Davis
good.
also does that.
Ben Davis does? Yeah.
They got the co-op still.
I'd love to
We call it
come in and
co-op.
learn this type of stuff.
Yeah, I'm on
Area
40.
31.
It's, I mean, and that's the thing is I try to share all of my knowledge that I have
That's the way
that other guys older than me have shared with me, you know, along.
That's how I learned.
Yeah. All right, so we're good on our ring end gap on all of these. So, I want to mix these up. Another one of the things that I do before I go putting rings on, because I put all my rings on right here. I've got a set of ring pliers over there that I'm going to put them all on right here. But one of the things that I do before I do that is these Circlips that hold the piston wrist pin. Our wrist pin is in here. It's brand new. They put it in this nice little package here. But that's our new wrist pin. That's what's going to hold our piston to our rod. There's a circlip that goes on either side of this piston that holds that in. We took them out earlier when we were disassembling last weekend. So what I always do, and there's different ways to do this stuff, but I'll take one and I always put it in one side because I lean my piston up like this, and normally I'll push these in by hand. And I don't want to have the rings on there when I'm doing that because I don't want to pry on the rings. And sometimes I got to take my gloves off because I don't want to get a piece of this rubber caught in there because it's a really tight fit.
Connor, you're handling haywire for me.
You're what?
Let's do his own thing. Handle is doing his own thing.
All right, well, it's not like this is top secret. Let's see. And I do like, this piston's got an arrow on it. So these pistons are directional. The arrow always points towards the front of the bike. So that's gonna go on like this. These are not front and rear. Sometimes you'll get pistons that are front and rear. These are not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Circlip in on this side because I don't know why, it's just personal preference, but I like installing my final Circlip from this side of the bike. So I'll put this side in. Most of the time your gap on your Circlips, you either want at 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And the reason is because this thing is going to sit in there and go up and down in the cylinder like this. And in theory, if you've got your gap at like say 9 or 3, that force of this going up and down could potentially, get this Circlip to pop out because that force is bringing it down, closing that gap, and it could pop out. But normally I kind of show you, I just set the top in and I just kind of swing the bottom in.
So that's the grenade pin.
Just like that. And now that's in. I got my gap right there at the top, and I just pushed it in with my fingers. Harley they've got a kit somewhere here. I brought it out. It's a piston Circlip. And I may use that to put the other side in once we get the pistons on the bike. Sometimes that is a little bit easier to use. But yeah, just like that, I got that one in. See that? Our gap is at 12 o'clock. That one's in. I am going to go ahead while I'm doing this, and I'm going to put this other side in. Hopefully
that
it'll.
was the question that the video that we had watched, which one mattered, which one went in the front and back, but you explained it.
Well, sometimes your pistons can be directional, like if you've got a big bore and they'll cut out the skirts, like on the back of the front and the front of the rear, so that as these things come down, they don't hit.
Okay.
And so sometimes they will take a little bit of metal out right here if you're working with
Like
something.
Tappit?
Yeah. So that as it comes down, they don't make contact, because these things do get real close down inside the case. I mean, obviously they've got bevels on them already. And if you look, I know there's been some people like, oh man, your cylinder's got damage. Because I believe, so this is the rear. Okay, so that's gonna sit, let's see, our push rods are over on that side. So the cylinder is gonna sit like that. That divot is right there in the front, like I was talking about. So I guarantee that if we set this one up like it's gonna go in, that divot is gonna be on the rear. So that tells me that these sleeves are really close down there in the case.
What's this number right here? 223, and it's 228 over here.
The only thing I can figure is that since these are front and rear specific, it has something to do with the part number. Yeah, because see that says front, and this one says rear.
The M8s all have rear cylinder deactivation anyway, right?
Yes.
Idle speed.
Yes.
You know,
Twin cams have that
10
also.
10 miles per hour.
Yeah, when it gets too hot. Yeah. And basically all it's doing is it's just killing the fuel and the spark. Actually, I don't know if it kills the fuel. I'd have to research that. But it turns it into an air compressor, basically.
On the M8?
M8 and twin
Well,
cam.
M8s and the old twin cams.
Oh,
too,
really?
yeah.
I didn't know the old twin cams were there.
Well, now not
newer
all of the older
models.
ones. Yeah, I mean, like I'm 16, 15, 14, you know. Actually, even, it might be like an 08 and later thing. Yeah, because it was the fly-by-wire that we used to turn it on and off. If you turn your bike on and take your throttle grip and roll it backwards, like forwards to the front of the bike, watch your cruise light. Your cruise light's gonna light up either red or green, or orange or green.
That's
Green
on the
means
new-
it's on
M8s?
all of them,
Or on all of
even twin cams. Yep, you turn the bike on, take the throttle and roll it forward,
Yeah.
just hold it,
Yeah.
your cruise light will flash, and it's either gonna flash green or it's gonna flash orange. Green means it's on. That means that when your bike gets too hot and you're at a stop sign when it's 90 degrees, it only does it at idle. Once you take off from idle, it kicks that rear cylinder back on instantly.
I wish I would known that last year. Or like if it's in a parade.
Yeah, if you're in a parade, you're in traffic.
Last year, and we got
Yep.
stuck in a traffic jam for about
Yep,
an
it'll
hour.
shut the rear
They
cylinder
shut
off.
them off and they shut the bike
Yeah.
off.
Well, now I had an instructor
But
that
I
used to
didn't
talk
know
about
that. I didn't know that.
Daytona, being in Daytona in traffic, actually turning a bike off.
That's what
You
we
get
did.
up on top of the bridge, turn your bike off, and just kind of roll
That's
down
what
the
we
other
did. We
side.
could test it.
There's two benefits to that. Number one, you're cooling the bike down. Number two, when you go to fire it back up, it's going to be on warm up enrichment, which is almost like having the choke out, so you're throwing more fuel to it. That'll help cool it down too.
I didn't know you could do that. I should shut my bike off, roll down the mountain.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when we build motors, we'll have some customers that'll come back. You know, we'll get these sales guys to explain it a little clearer, you know, how it works. But, you know, they'll come back, man, my bike, it's running like crap. You know, I pull up to a stop sign and it just wants to buck and, you know, it's missing out. And you explain to them, well, the bike is hot and it's trying to cool itself down. Because the minute you take off, it kicks that, you know, you wouldn't even notice it. But yeah, you can roll your throttle off and see whether it's on or off.
Forward?
Yep. Turn the bike on, roll it forward, and watch your cruise light, because it's going to flash.
I didn't know that.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Hell, I shut it off all the time. If I'm Brown County, I get stuck in the hills over there, I just shut it on.
I don't like it, you know, because I've got a motor that's built, you know, it's got a cam and it's
You shut it
tuned,
down.
and I just shut it off
Shut it
because
down.
I've got my bike tuned where I got enough fuel going to it that I really don't care. You know, it's rich anyhow. But yeah, it is kind of annoying when you pull up to a stoplight because a lot of these new ones, we only do about a 6 mile test ride loop. And when it's 90 degrees outside, these stock bikes, they'll be into that by the time we get back from our 6 mile ride when it's hot out. Yeah, about 6 miles and it's already wanting to cut the rear cylinder out. All right, where was I? Got our clips in, so now I'm ready to put some piston rings on. Before I do that, I may, and this is honestly just another habit thing, is I'm gonna take these and I'm gonna clean them off with some brake clean. With these special gloves. I didn't used to wear gloves, but they are nice. How we doing, Connor? You asleep over there? I haven't heard Mike chime in yet. Oh, yeah? All right, hey, you guys have a good weekend. So yeah, I just sprayed it off with some brake clean there. It's just like alcohol. Gets all the film and stuff off of it. Well, where'd my air go? You're good. I don't know, but I'm hungry. All right, so now we can get back to our rings. Again, the W, we got to install it like we're getting a W. And it's just going to set down in there in that groove. And it's real loose until we put these other two. One goes on the top, one goes on the bottom, and just kind of holds this. I believe is that a scavenge ring it's called maybe? This is just real delicate because you can bend these super easy. And I just I work them around. Now I got the top one in. I know my gap is like over here. They want you to kind of stagger your end gaps. So I'm gonna move that one around a little bit. Maybe. See, it's already getting caught on that gap. There's one. It is not wanting to come out of there. I always get nervous because I don't want to break these. There it is. That one's in. And you saw how long it took me to get it in there perfect. You gotta be real gentle with that stuff because these will break. Yeah, all that just to get that oil control ring set up on there. These are just some snap-on ring pliers. Make sure we know which way is the top. That's the top. We just take them, we just kind of spread them out a little bit. You gotta get it down to that bottom groove. Got close. There it is. Make sure we got the top. Like I'll put that end gap over there, and I'm gonna put this end gap like across from it. Just like that. So now our rings are on this piston. I like doing this on the table just because you saw how, difficult it was to get that bottom set on there. And if I wasn't doing it right here and I was doing it on the bike, then I'm fighting it on the bike. And you got cylinder studs in the way, and I would rather do it just like this, just so I know that I've got it on there right. So that piston is ready to go on. See, that popped out of there.
I might have missed this, but I have a question.
You what?
I might have missed this, but I have a question for you.
Okay.
Why don't you put the thinner ring on first instead of the,
Okay, well here, I'll pull this back over here so you can see that. I don't know if you can see it or not, but okay, as you go across the top of this, there's a lip right there. See that lip?
Yeah.
This ring is gonna help hold that.
Okay.
Okay, so you can't, this won't go in after these are on.
Okay.
And that's, I'm having a problem. Sometimes you have a tough time of it because if this pops out and then you can't get that ring in there. That's why you really got to pay attention. And yeah, they just feel brittle. you know, which there's not a lot of metal there. And so you just got to be careful. So I'll go down to the bottom. See if we can get this to go down to the bottom. See, that's what I'm talking about. See how that just popped out of there? Mm-hmm. And so you got to try to set that back down in there like that. Hold that, and then bring this other one down. There, so now I got the bottom one in. So now I'll put the top one in and try not to have that come out on us. There it is. That one went in. The only problem is that I got my end gaps right here close to each other, and I'm going to try to spin those around a little bit. I just don't like my end gaps being right there next to each other, so I'm just moving this bottom ring around a little bit so the end gaps aren't lined up. That's all I'm doing. Just separating the end gaps a little bit. They'll probably rotate on their own. There's the top. There's our middle ring. There's our top. There's the top ring. So now that one's ready. So our pistons are ready for install. If we got time, we can probably go ahead and at least get them on. We got time? Well, I can go ahead and we can at least get the pistons on the bike. I am going to clean those pins up. A lot of times what I'll do, we may want to get some clean engine oil, is I'll lube those with some clean engine oil. Got some in my can over there.
They got every ring mark top except for the oil scavenger ring.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to me,
Yep.
you know, maybe paint it or something, or
Right.
you know, put something kind of, you know, that make it foolproof. A little
Yeah.
bit more, you know.
So there we go. I just put a little bit of oil on those. And then most of the time what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start that piston pin on the side that doesn't have the clip in it. And so that pin is just going to go in there like that, right? That's going to come through there, and that's what's going to hold us to the rod. Okay, we've already got a clip in over here, so it won't come out this side. So I'll just put it in there like that. Some of them are. Yeah, some of them have bushings in here. These new ones do not. So I got the arrow facing towards the front, so I can look right down through here and line it up. and that pin just slid right in. Now what I am gonna do is I need to go get some, I've got some rubber hoses that I'm gonna put on those cylinder studs. Can I run and grab those? Should I take this mic off? Thanks, sir.
That was quick.
Yep. So basically all I'm doing is protecting the rings from the cylinder studs. These studs have got the threads on them. They get caught on the rings, they could cause some damage. It's just to help alleviate some of that. Huh?
Fluffy.
Oh.
Don't forget your fluffy.
I know, and I'm good at knocking it off of there. There we go. Let's get our other piston. We'll get our other piston on. Just center everything up. And it just slides right in. Just like that. Now we're ready for our circlips that I was talking about. And a lot of times once the wrist pin is already in there, this piston clip installer works really well. So it's got a little hook on it. I don't know if you can see that. There's a hook right here that will hook that ring or the circlip. You just kind of set it like this. And basically you just shove it in. We'll see.
For destall also?
In theory, yes. But sometimes you can't get that little hook in there to hook that ring and get it out, depending on how the clips were put in. Like if you've got an end gap, you know, where it's not supposed to be, sometimes this is difficult, and it's just easier to take a little screwdriver and just pop them right out. Where you got to be careful on this is losing this. You know, this is a spring. See, that one did not make it all the way in. It's close. There it goes. You hear it click? So that one's in, on, ready to go. Do the same thing for the front. That one went all the way in. Yep. That one went all the way in. So that's that. Pistons are on. Circlips are in, rings are ready. So honestly, we're ready to put cylinders on. And I kind of want to go ahead and put the cylinders on. I mean, do you care? What do you think?
I mean, we can go as long as you want to.
What time is it?
32.
1:32, that took 2 minutes.
You're flipping it, fall off.
You're calling sick.
Oh.
He's dangling.
Oh. Well, I mean, the ring compressors, there's not a lot of people here, so I'm not too embarrassed because very rarely do you get it on the first try. Especially with these rings. Like I said, they're finicky. So as you're putting the cylinder down on there, you got to make sure not to damage the rings as the cylinder goes on. And sometimes it'll take us 2 or 3 goes at it, you know, to get it to go.
I think that would be a better suited starting next time.
Okay.
Because we'll just have more people. And I want to embarrass you as much as I can.
Well, and that will do that. I will have to be on my game. Because it is. I mean, I can... I don't know. I can kind of show you how they work while we've got a little bit of time. I won't do it, but. So we take these ring compressors. These will work for V8s, V6s, what have you. So, let's see. I'm gonna need a bigger one. Basically, you just kind of go around the piston, just like this. And you put these pliers on here, and you cinch it down. So that will hold those rings real tight like that against the piston. And so in theory, all you do is you just take your cylinder, walk it over here, and just push the cylinder right down on top of it. But as this comes down, these rings are gonna wanna pop out of there. And so if you don't have your cylinder just perfectly level and pushed down just right, sometimes it'll get cockeyed and your rings will pop out of one side. And if you don't stop, you can damage these rings, and we don't wanna damage any rings. Connor wants me to leave that embarrassing stuff for next week, so I guess that's where we're gonna stop. But that's what we're gonna do. So now we've got all week to think about it. So with that,
Before we get demonetized.
yeah, we've got a ticket to ride getting ready to come through here. It is getting ready to get loud.
We don't want any copyright infringement like we did last week.
Right, yeah, we don't want to. So with that, I think we will bid everyone adieu. Enjoy the snow. It's going to snow this weekend.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next Saturday, and we'll pick up where we left off. It's been real.
And we're out. Yes, we're out. Thank you, sir.
Seriously, thank you.
I started to hurt, and I was like,
Oh, when I was doing that video in there, I'm telling you, I told Zach, I was like, man, something's not right. Like, I can't focus. I can't read the words.
I feel it. Like, it's just been running straight up for 3.5 hours, and now we're charging it flawless. This battery absolutely hates me.
That's how stuff goes boom.
all of a sudden it's gonna go black, and you're gonna hear people screaming.